Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're embarking on a pretty epic 200,000-year journey. Our mission? To completely dismantle this stubborn myth of a static, isolated Africa and really explore the continent's undeniable role as the absolute wellspring of human civilization.
Here's a quick look at our roadmap. We're going to start with the cradle of humanity, then look at the birth of human culture and the world's first writing. After that, we'll explore the empires of the Nile, the Iron Age Revolution, and finally, Kush and the warrior queens. Let's get going.
Section 1. The Cradle of Humanity, the Biological Dawn.
So our shared history begins in Africa's Great Rift Valley. It's this massive 3,000-mile geological fault stretching all the way from Ethiopia down to Malawi. And it acted as this intense crucible for early humanity. About 200,000 years ago, anatomically modern Homo sapiens emerged right here. A huge piece of evidence for this actually came in 1997, when Dr. Berhane Asfaw and his team discovered an extraordinary, near-complete skull in Ethiopia. They named it Ideltu, which literally translates to firstborn. Ideltu walked the earth 160,000 years ago. This discovery was absolutely monumental because it pushed the timeline of modern humans way back into history, literally during a time when Europe was still packed with Neanderthals. Then, between 80,000 and 50,000 years ago, a small, highly adapted population of these early humans began migrating out of Africa to populate the rest of the world. But hey, before we follow that migration out, there's an incredibly profound genetic concept we really need to grasp first: mitochondrial Eve. Thanks to mitochondrial DNA, we know that every single living person on Earth today shares a common, direct maternal ancestor who lived in this very region 200,000 years ago. So the crucial point here is, no matter what we happen to look like today, our genetic differences are literally skin deep. The roots of every single family tree trace directly back to Black ancestors from this small, prehistoric survival band. Isn't that wild? Moving on to Section 2, Birth of Human Culture, the Dawn of Creativity. You know, when those early humans eventually migrated out of Africa, they didn't just carry their biology with them. They carried the very seeds of creative expression, and all of that started right here. Actually, art history gets completely rewritten when you really look at the evidence. For the longest time, the oldest artwork was widely believed to be the 35,000-year-old cave paintings in Lascaux, France. But down in Blombos Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found a hashed ochre block dating back 77,000, maybe even up to 100,000 years ago. This block was intentionally ground down, mixed with water and minerals to create paint, and most likely used as a symbolic stamp. This proves that complex cognitive behavior and symbolic communication existed way before humans ever set foot outside the African continent. Now skip ahead with me to 6,000 years ago. That's around 3600 BC. In the Nile Valley pit burials, elites were already incredibly focused on their personal style. Archaeological evidence shows they were sporting bouffants, fake hair extensions, and even mohawks. And they maintained these elaborate styles with long, thick afro combs perfectly designed for African hair. So it turns out the afro-comb definitely wasn't invented in the 1960s. It's actually a 6,000-year-old high-status statement. Section 3. The world's first writing, the Abydos discovery. So around 4000 BC, a dramatic climate shift occurred. The once lush, green Sahara completely dried up, turning into a desert. This forced people to disperse and flock to the much more fertile lands of the Nile Valley. And as these populations condensed into complex hierarchical societies, they absolutely needed a new way to communicate. Which begs the question, where was the first writing actually invented? If you're like most folks, you were probably taught that writing began solely in Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq and Syria. Well, get ready for a pretty massive revelation. As Yale Egyptologist Dr. John Darnell points out, ancient Egyptian writing actually developed independently of Mesopotamia, and almost at the exact same time. Back in 1988, archaeologists at Abydos, Egypt, uncovered the tomb of an early ruler known as the Scorpion King. This dates back to about 3250 BCE. Inside, they found 150 elite ivory tags with holes drilled right through them, meant to be tied to bags or boxes of goods. And these carved symbols weren't just decorative artwork. They specifically denoted royal property and origins. It proved that writing was simultaneously and independently invented in Africa as a vital tool for organizing early royal bureaucracy. All right, Section 4. Empires of the Nile, the rise of complex societies. All along the Nile, we see the parallel rise of two incredibly powerful and, quite frankly, bitterly rivalrous civilizations. On one side, you have Egypt, surging to power around 2600 BC. Its absolute masterpiece is Khufu's Great Pyramid of Giza. Now keep in mind, it was built with 2.3 million stone blocks by conscripted Egyptian farmers paying their taxes, not by slaves, utilizing the region's vast limestone wealth. On the flip side, just to the south, the Kingdom of Kush, centered at its capital Kerma, rose around 2500 BC. This was a highly advanced, planned city with a population of over 10,000, boasting a massive mud brick structure known as the Defufa, and they were renowned for their deadly archers and incredible reserves of gold.
Now, what's really interesting here is the intense, bitter rivalry that formed between them. Egypt heavily relied on Kush for luxury goods, especially gold, which they literally revered as the skin of the gods. But of course, this reliance bred serious conflict. Around 1500 BC, Pharaoh Thutmose I launched a brutal invasion of Kush. He executed prisoners and, to show absolute total dominance, strapped the body of the fallen Kushite king right to the prow of his ship. Kush was then forced to endure 400 years of subjugation under Egyptian rule, paying heavy tribute and even adopting Egyptian gods, like Amun. But this conquest ultimately set the stage for a dramatic historical reversal centuries later.
Fast forward to 750 BC, and Egypt had become fragmented and diminished. That is exactly when the Kushite king Piye saw his golden opportunity. Driven by his fervent worship of the god Amun, he launched a holy war. And as he sailed north, he delivered a powerful warning. I shall let Egypt taste the taste of my fingers. And he absolutely did. Piye's army conquered a fragmented Egypt, reunited the lands, and established the 25th dynasty. The once conquered Kushites became the conquerors, ruling as the Black Pharaohs of the Nile. Section 5. The Iron Age Revolution, a technological leap. So while the Nile was seeing these grand, shifting empires, a completely different kind of revolution was happening over in the lush forests of Central Africa. Between 1800 BC and 1500 BC, small communities of craftsmen were stoking high-heat furnaces to fire ceramics, but the lateritic African soil held a secret. During this firing process, they accidentally discovered iron smelting as a byproduct. This completely shatters the long-held myth that iron was first discovered in Turkey. African craftsmen independently unlocked this incredibly complex technology all on their own. Iron rapidly replaced stone for agricultural tools and weapons, and this directly fueled the massive Bantu migration around 3000 BC, a huge movement that eventually populated 2/3 of sub-Saharan Africa. And, as history shows us, massive technological booms almost always trigger artistic renaissances. Crafted in modern-day Nigeria around 900 BC, right at the very height of this iron revolution, the Nok terracottas are exquisitely detailed, highly sophisticated ceremonial sculptures featuring heavy jewelry and intricate hairstyles. They represent the earliest sculptural art found in Africa outside of Egypt, proving just how rapidly Central African culture was advancing right alongside its technology. Which brings us to Section 6, Kush and the Warrior Queens Defying the Roman Empire. Let's bring our narrative climax right back to the Kingdom of Kush. By 500 BC, they had relocated to Meroe, an ironworking powerhouse famously ruled by fierce queens known as Kandakes. Let's zero in on one of the most formidable, Queen Amanirenas. By 31 BC, Rome had just defeated Cleopatra's Egypt and stood as the undisputed most powerful military machine in the ancient world. But when they tried to push their boundaries south into Kush, this one-eyed black woman, described by the Greeks as having brilliant tactical skills, fought them in a bloody war for 5 straight years. She successfully pushed back the Roman advance, and her victories were chronicled in the Meroitic script. That's an indigenous African writing system that remains so complex we actually still cannot translate it today. How crazy is that? But her strategic genius was matched only by her sheer audacity. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what kind of leader she was. During a raid, Queen Amanirenas' forces captured the bronze head of a statue of Emperor Augustus Caesar himself. She brought it back to her capital and buried it directly beneath the threshold of her grand temple. This ensured that every single person in Kush would literally wipe their feet on Rome's leader as they walked inside. She didn't just humiliate Caesar. Her clever military tactics successfully forced him to the negotiating table, securing a peace treaty that guaranteed Kush's independence for another 400 years. We have just covered a breathtaking 200,000 years of history, which brings us to a final provocative thought. If Africa gave us the biological and cultural blueprint for human civilization itself, what other world-changing histories are waiting to be uncovered? The evidence we've explored today really cements the takeaway that Africa is the dynamic wellspring of global history. We've barely scratched the surface here, and I hope this explainer leaves you hungry to uncover the endless stories still hidden beneath our past.
Thanks so much for learning with me today.